Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's session. My name is Danny, and I'm the event planner for the New York Reactor Space. Before we start, I have a few things to go over. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. We encourage engagement in the chat, but please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional, and on topic. Useful links will be shared in the chat. The session is recorded and will be available on demand 24 to 48 hours on the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel. Which brings us to today's session. It'll run for approximately 1 hour with time for questions throughout. I will now turn it over to our speaker for introductions.
Yeah, hello and welcome from my side. My name is Ulrich Christ. Happy to have you here and host this session on how to integrate your SAP data into Microsoft Fabric. As I said, my name is Ulrich Christ. I'm a product manager in the Microsoft Data Integration team. I have a long history with SAP. I used to work for SAP for a long time, and I joined Microsoft about 3 years ago. And since then, I've basically been dealing and helping the team to kind of evolve our SAP data strategy and find ways how to efficiently integrate SAP data into the Fabric environment and other Microsoft options as well, of course. So let's get started with a presentation here. I would propose to postpone questions to the end. I'll probably do a presentation for around 45 minutes. So let's keep the remaining 15 minutes for Q&A. I'll go over the comments later on, and then we'll basically try to answer a couple of them. Probably not all of them, depending on how many we'll have, but let's keep that for the end, basically. All right, so with that, let's get started. So short intro. Let me briefly set the scene. What is Microsoft Fabric? Well, the name and the slide here basically says it and summarizes it nicely. It's our unified data platform for the era of AI. So basically, it's a software as a service offering which gives you all the capabilities you need for end-to-end analytics. Starting with OneLake as a unified storage, which you see in the middle. Of course, everything is AI enabled and powered by AI. You see co-pilots throughout the product. We, of course, also have machine learning capabilities, so AI is everywhere. And you see basically all the workloads you need for an analytics solution, right? It starts with Data Factory for data integration. We have data engineering capabilities with notebooks, for example. We have data warehouse capabilities with relational databases in the solution. We have data science capabilities, machine learning, all of that out of the box, real-time data intelligence for streaming analytics, all of that. And of course, Power BI, which is kind of the flagship analytics tool in the market. All of that as one service out of the box for your use. We call it a platform, and it's not just a platform for you to build your analytics solutions on top. It's also a platform in the sense that it's extensible, and we'll talk about that later on. Some of you might have heard about that. It's also possible to provide custom workloads in Fabric. So even from an ISV perspective, if you're a software vendor, if you have good analytic solutions, there are ways to integrate those solutions with Fabric and make them part of the platform so that that customers can use them as well. All right. So that's basically the overview of Fabric. Now we're going to focus on the data factory piece and, of course, specifically on SAP sources. But let's start with a brief introduction into the capabilities of Data Factory. Data Factory basically gives you all the functionality you need for data management in an analytics solution, which basically starts on the left-hand side with best-in-class connectivity. We have out-of-the-box connectivity for hundreds of sources. I'll show a slide later on which summarizes that. We have data movement capabilities, orchestration capabilities with pipelines, transformation capabilities with Data Flows Gen 2. Of course, we have mechanisms to deploy things efficiently in multiple tier landscapes. We have observability, monitoring capabilities, all of that. Everything on top of OneLake with a tight integration. And as I mentioned earlier, everything powered by AI. For example, some of you might have seen there we have co-pilots for pipelines, where you can basically describe the kind of pipeline you want, and you get a proposal pipeline which you can start working on. So that is the scope of Microsoft Fabric's Data Factory. Let's briefly summarize what we have in terms of connectivity. Fabric comes with 170 plus connectors out of the box, built by us or by third parties. So that's basically what you get from the platform for free out of the box. The whole platform is also extensible, right? So there's thousands of custom connectors which third parties have built, in many cases also certified based on an SDK which we provide. So the whole thing can also be extended to your own connectors if you find gaps in our offering. Some of the key items, key aspects, and key tools within Fabric Data Factory are listed on this slide. I'm not going to go through all of them. I just want to basically briefly discuss the top three, maybe. So we've talked about briefly, or I briefly mentioned pipelines as kind of the way to schedule and orchestrate data integration and data management workflows. A lot of you might know similar experiences from Azure Data Factory. It's a very similar concept. Data flows Gen 2. Probably many of you have seen that earlier on, right? It's a concept of, or it's a functionality to manipulate data, to transform data in a very nice and intuitive and interactive way, working on the sample data set, so you can always see how your transformations affect the data, whether this is going the right direction or not. It's slightly different from what you're used to from kind of generic and other third-party ETL tools, but it's a super intuitive experience for data transformation. And the last point, and this is something which will also be relevant in our context here, is mirrored databases. Mirroring is basically how we envision change data capture capabilities for Data Factory and for Fabric, and this is going to be a topic in this presentation as well. So it's basically about replicating data from a source into one link. Now, let's start with an overview of the SAP connectivity in Fabric. And let's maybe at first have a quick look and an overview of the strategy we have there, because it's a strategy which is based on multiple pillars, and then basically do a deep dive into each of these aspects and see what we have there and what our plans are. So to get started, the first pillar of our connectivity is the built-in connectors. You already saw we have 170 built-in connectors. A number of them are SAP related. We have some out-of-the-box SAP connectors. The aspiration we have and the plan we're working on is basically to serve all standard SAP use cases out of the box. Right? Whatever standard means. I mean, I intentionally left the term a little bit fluffy, but basically, most of the standard SAP use cases, which come to mind, should be able to solve and to serve based on the built-in connectors, so that you don't have to look for alternatives here. The current focus which we're having here, and that's exactly what our engineering team is currently working on, is to pretty much achieve feature parity with Azure Data Factory. Right? You might have seen the number of connectors. We have around 7 or 8 SAP connectors in Azure Data Factory for Pro-DI use cases. On the Fabric side, we don't have all of them yet, right? But that's basically what we're working on. So that's the high-level strategy for the built-in connectivity, and I'll go into details later. Second pillar, SAP is pretty complex. And I talked about standard use cases, whatever that is. There are always niche use cases. Like one of the things which you hear a lot or once in a while, not a lot, but you hear again and again, I should say, is that customers have built custom transactions in their SAP system and want to get data out of these transactions. So basically, you have a transaction in your SAP GUI, which in the end produces a tabular output. And running such a transaction in background and extracting the data which is produced by that transaction, that's a use case which you hear once in a while for that data. So it's something for specialized vendors. That is one of the reasons why working with a partner ecosystem is super valuable for us. Right? There are vendors who have specialized on such use cases, who have add-ons to the SAP system, big aspects here in this in this integration as well. We're working with partners. We're opening up the platform to enable partners to offer their data integration solutions as well. The main focus for the moment here is make sure that we have a lot of partners who support OneLake, that we also want to have offer mirroring capabilities based on these partner workloads in terms of open mirroring, and we'll come to that later. And the third pillar of our strategy is basically an integration with SAP's toolset, right? SAP also has a very strong and very clear data strategy with analytics tooling in terms of SAP Datasphere, SAP Analytics Cloud, and a lot of customers, especially the larger ones, basically try to find ways how to leverage the best of both worlds and combine SAP tooling with our tooling. So basically finding aligned ways with SAP to integrate across the tool stacks, that's an important aspect here as well, and a focus for us. Right now, we're really looking into deepening the integration between Fabric and Datasphere so that customers can basically build solutions based on the strategic tools of both vendors. Right? So for certain use cases, the SAP tooling with Datasphere and SAP Analytics Cloud, maybe if it comes to financial planning, is the preferred solution, while for other use cases, SAP data needs to go into Fabric. All of these integrations we want to enable. All right, so let's have a quick overview more concretely on the first pillar here and look at the built-in SAP connectors. So what's the current state here at the moment? In Fabric, when you look at what we have out of the box at the moment, we basically have two different kinds of connectors. There's the SAP BW connector, which we pretty much inherited from the Power BI side in Fabric. It allows you to access the analytic layer, which basically is the so-called BW query in BW and also S/4HANA, by the way. A lot of people don't know that SAP S/4HANA, which is SAP's flagship ERP product, also comes with an analytic layer, which from a technology perspective relies on BW query technology. So this BW connector can be used to get that kind of data out of the SAP source system, landed in Fabric OneLake, for example, via a data flow Gen 2. You can massage it on the fly. You can manipulate it, do some transformations. So that's a perfect use case for CDI, citizen data integration use cases, right? When a business user basically wants to manipulate the data they get from a BW query provided by IT, or wants to enrich that data with their own data set, extracting the data from that query into OneLake, doing the enhancements there or the manipulations, and then rendering this in Power BI. That's a perfect use case for that connector. Not so much for huge data sets, so you would not transfer millions, hundreds of millions of rows using that connector, because a BW query in the end is not built for that, right? It's built for a fairly limited amount of data. I would say a few 100,000 records at most in typical cases. Of course, there are extreme use cases where this is not the case, but typically it's a result set which a human can interpret in a decent amount of time. A couple of minutes, maybe 20, 30, half an hour, 30 minutes, around that time frame. So it's not huge data sets for mass data ingestion, right? So that's one of the connectors we have. The other one which we have is the SAP HANA connector. And that serves two use cases. So it can be used both in data flows and in pipelines. For data flows, it's very similar in spirit to the BW connector. So you would typically connect it, for example, to a calculation view in your HANA database, which is, again, the calculation view is similar to a BW query, the analytic layer of the HANA database. You would get the data out of there and land it in OneLake. Again, with data flow Gen 2 capabilities, you have the options to transform that data and then basically work with it, enrich it, render it in Power BI or whatever you want, right? So typical citizen DI use case. We also offer that connector in pipelines. So you can basically, and that's a capability which we've had in Azure Data Factory for a long time with the HANA connector there, as part of the pipeline copy activity experience. This is, in fact, a connector which really serves mass data use cases. In ADF, when we look into our telemetry, we see customers who are transferring hundreds of millions and billions of rows using that connector. And we basically brought exactly the same, or pretty much the same implementations, pretty much the same functionality into Fabric for such use cases. So with the HANA Connect and pipelines, you already have one capability which allows you to really do mass data extraction from an SAP source, in this case, SAP HANA or SAP Datasphere, by the way, because Datasphere also resides on HANA Cloud, which we can also connect to using that connector. So you can also get snapshots of data from Datasphere using, using that HANA connector. Let's look at a couple of screenshots here, just two examples which I picked, both with the HANA connector. First use case or first screenshots here in Dataflow Gen 2. So I'm connecting to a HANA cloud database, which you can guess from the suffix of the URL here. And basically, you even see the SQL statement which we're doing, right? So we're basically doing a select star from some table, and you see the result set. And here you also see a little bit of the capabilities and the user experience of Dataflow Gen 2, where you have where you, for example, see that this column is a date in the SAP internal format, which is like a 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, and then you can transform that right on the fly. Right-click on this column, select change type, and then say, okay, this is actually a date, and Dataflow Gen 2 will do that transformation for you. And then on the top. On the bottom right, I don't show this in this screenshot. You have the capability to store the result of that transformation in one lake and work off of that. So that is how the HANA connector looks and feels in Dataflow Gen 2. When we move on to pipelines, again, HANA connector I mentioned is available in pipelines as well. This is very similar to the experience which you might know from Azure Data Factory. So super simple pipeline with just a single copy activity here. You see the connection to, again, a Datasphere HANA Cloud tenant in this case. I basically chose to not simply extract a query, but run a slightly more complex SQL statement. We'll see that in a second. And you see that we also have some capabilities which support mass data extraction, like this dynamic range partitioning, which basically allows us to chunk the data of a potentially huge table into smaller chunks, so that we don't run into out-of-memory issues on the source side, and can really nicely integrate huge data volumes in multiple queries which we issue based on this partitioning criteria. So when you look at the next screenshot here, I think you would see that. So basically, as the dynamic range criterion, I'm basically giving the sales district here. So we will basically do a partitioning by region, so to speak, right? The sales district, and fetch the result set for smaller chunks of sales regions or sales districts, move it over. And you also see that here are the details of that query. You can use the pipeline and parameterization capabilities of pipeline to build some pretty cool stuff. Like this is let's call it poor man's change data capture, right? I'm basically getting a snapshot where the change or the creation date is greater than or equal, a bit hard to read for me here, greater than or equal to a certain date, which I can ingest as a parameter. So we can basically you can do some watermarking, keep the last watermark for the date, and then basically only extract data which has changed since your last extraction in the next run, right? So very simple, but very efficient and frequently used mechanism to only do delta or incremental loads. So that's it for the existing capabilities. What's the roadmap for 2025 regarding the SAP connectivity? And I already mentioned it on the intro slide. We basically said we want to get towards feature parity with ADF for ProDI use cases. So basically, when it comes to those ADF connectors, which are really used by customers for mass data integration, we want to offer them in Fabric out of the box, so that customers don't have to resort to Azure Data Factory for such cases, which of course you can still do. But basically, having those connectors built into the Fabric platform is our priority here. And the two connectors which are of highest relevance for that for such use cases are the SAP Table Connector and the SAP BW Open Hub Connector. The Table Connector, when we look at our ADF telemetry, it's used by many customers. It's also used to transfer significant data volumes. It's slightly different to the HANA connector. It does not connect directly to the database layer, but connects to SAP tables via the SAP application server. So the HANA connector is purely based on ODBC connectivity. This one basically connects to the SAP source system via RFC, and is able to basically extract data from dictionary tables in the HANA database. Sorry, in the SAP application server underneath which you could have a HANA database or any other database. So this works with any database because it goes via the application server. Sorry for that glitch. Second one, the BW Open Hub connector. That's also one of the connectors which a lot of customers use, especially when integrating with BW for mass data scenarios. So this is really something where you can extract data out of your DSOs, ADSOs, info cubes in BW and move it over into the Fabric side. Plan for these two connectors is to have them available in Fabric end of this quarter, maybe early next quarter. So basically, when we finish this engineering semester, we want to make these connectors GA. Think of March, April timeframe. That's the goal we have for these connectors. And then there's basically two connectors left on the ADF side. That's the SAP's ECC connector and the Cloud for Customer connector, C4C. These two connectors are both based on OData, so they connect to OData services in the first case in ECC and S/4HANA, and the second one connects to OData services in SAP Cloud for Customer. Both of them are not so widely adopted, to be honest, so they are more niche use cases. In the first case, especially when it comes to ECC systems, well, SAP has had OData connectivity or OData services for a pretty long time, but there are not many OData services coming out of the box with especially older ECC systems. So that's why in the ECC case, that's a pretty rare use case. On the other hand, OData is also not a protocol for mass data transfer. It's a little bit chatty. So from a performance perspective, it's typically not the best way to get data out. That's probably why not too many customers are using that. With these Cloud for Customer connector, it's probably an adopted solution, and consequently, not too many customers are using the connector on our side. Since both connectors are based on OData, you can already now use the generic OData connector, which we have in ADF and in Fabric Data Factory to connect, which gives you full OData capabilities, and you can also use it to connect to SAP application service, of course. Whether or how exactly we would build dedicated connectors for these use cases, we have not clarified yet. That's basically to be determined. As I said, for the moment, our recommendation for customers is go with the generic OData connector for such use cases. We'll see how we tackle this in the long run. Depends a little bit on customer feedback. As I said, since there's not too much adoption on the ADF side, we honestly don't expect too many customer requests on the Fabric side as well, which might mean that we stick to the recommendation of just using generic OData, but we might also, based on customer feedback, decide to actually implement these connectors in Fabric as well. We'll see. So, second pillar of that of our strategy, the partner ecosystem, and that's, as I said, a very important one, not just for niche use cases, but because there's a whole and a big partner ecosystem for SAP sources with solutions which have been around for decades, sometimes 10, 15, 20 years, robust, proven tools. They provide a lot of value, and a lot of customers are using these tools. So integrating them with Fabric is, from our perspective, a really, really good way to go. You might have seen announcements which we made around this integration at FabCon in Stockholm end of last year. Maybe you see a link to a blog post here. Maybe let me quickly bring up that blog post in the presentation here. So I basically wrote a blog post with a similar title like this presentation, by the way, which summarizes options to integrate SAP data into Fabric. And here you basically find a whole set of partners, 6 partners who have integrated with Fabric already. You also find links to the solutions of these partners, so you can basically get more detailed information from that blog post. Here you see the list of these 6 partners. What they basically did is, so these solutions basically work based on proprietary data extraction capabilities based on SAP add-ons. So what you need to do is, for each of these solutions, you need to install some additional other plugin or add-on on the SAP server, and that basically includes both the logic to extract the data, which can be snapshots, but all of these tools also support more advanced data integration capabilities like change data capture. So this logic is part of that add-on which you need to install, and of course also APIs which allow the tool to connect from the outside. So this is how these tools work. They are all SAP certified, right? So all of this is certified by SAP and approved from that perspective. So that's a very positive thing here as well. And they all support Fabric OneLake as a sink. So you can use all of these tools as of now to land data in Fabric OneLake, and then use any of the engines we have to work off of that. As I said, I would refer to the link and to the partner websites for more details on this. Now, we have not talked about change data capture so far. What's our story here? Well, I mentioned it early on. Database mirroring is basically how we envision change data capture in Fabric. So let me briefly start with an introduction to database mirroring, just to set the scene, and then move over to open mirroring, which is which turns mirroring into platform capability, and then also discuss how we envision this in the context of Fabric. So mirroring in general is a technology to replicate source data into your OneLake data estate, as we say here on the right-hand side. From a user experience, it's super simple. You basically connect to a source. Here on the left-hand side, you see a connector. So we basically connect to a source. We ask you to provide the typical metadata, which schema you want to extract the data from, which tables you want to extract. And that's pretty much all the configuration you need. Once you click start in the mirroring wizard, we fetch an initial snapshot, land it in the landing zone, and then basically we continuously fetch the change data from the source, so all the records which have changed since the last run, land them in the landing zone again, and do the change data processing into the table, so that basically the sync table here is always kept in sync with your source database. And that's currently generally available for Snowflake, for SQL databases, and for Cosmos DB. And with open mirroring, the new kid on the block, so to speak, we're kind of opening this up to third-party tools as well to integrate with our mirroring engine. And you see the slide has slightly changed. The diagram here on the left-hand side is a little bit different. Change data or initial snapshots into a landing zone. That's the first piece. And then a mirroring engine taking the data. We have changed to Belu. What we basically did is we provided a specification of how we expect the data to land in the landing zone, the data formats, the file names, kind of all that metadata. We describe how we specified how we expect this data to land, and everybody who complies with that specification can basically be part of that change data capture and open mirroring capability. Let me again move over my browser window here. Here's a nice blog by my colleague Wilson, who basically wrote an introduction to open mirroring in Fabric. You see roughly how that works. You see some of the partners who have implemented that already. So for example, Oracle is one of these partners, Stream, MongoDB, right? Quite a few partners. When you look at the documentation, that's also super interesting and very valuable. We have an overview, we also have a tutorial, and we even have the specification here. So it's really open. Anyone can implement this without even asking us. You don't even have to reach out. The documentation completely describes how you have to land the data if you want to set up such an open mirroring solution. So it's really something which anyone can implement based on the specification we provide. And that's also, as I said, and now we're moving again back to the SAP specific situation. That's also how we're envisioning this and working on this with our partners. So specifically for SAP, the partners which we showed on the previous slide, they are working on integrating with open mirroring as well. You see DAB and Simplement, two of these partners are already ready with this. They are onboarding first customers, so they have completed that work. And until end of Q1, so not a long time anymore, just a few months, we expect the other partners to be ready as well. Timelines look good, so end of March, early April, you should have a full set of options when it comes to mirroring SAP data into Fabric using these capabilities. Again, let me move over the browser window here. We have one of the pages here also is about the partner ecosystem we have for open mirroring. So those partners who are really collaborating with us. You saw Oracle Golden Gate for our replication from Oracle sources, Stream and MongoDB I already mentioned. And as you saw on the slide, there's DAB and Simplement who have already done this. Expect to come more and expect this list to get longer over the next couple of weeks or months. So you find nice links to the solutions. We also have some recordings with with DAB and Simplements already. Unfortunately, this is okay. Let me move this here. Okay. Sorry for that. I prepared that a little bit earlier and probably timed out. So here you see a video from the SAP on Azure podcast, which you might know. Some of you might know Holger, my colleague from the SAP on Azure team, who every week basically records a podcast for SAP-specific topics, SAP and Microsoft-specific topics in this podcast. And we last Saturday basically released a podcast episode which shows the integration of DAB here and on the other one, and I will probably run into the same situation, the integration with Simplement as well. You can have a look at that. Basically, to get an overview in that episode, we basically briefly discuss the background of these companies, what they're doing. Some of them are offering consulting services on top of the pure technology they have. We are discussing the high-level architecture and setup aspects, and we're also showing a quick demo of the partners are actually showing a quick demo of their solutions. So that will probably give you a nice impression of what these tools do and how they work and how they look and feel. All right, so that's basically what we have here in terms of mirroring. And as I said, this is kind of completing this strategy and executing on that strategy is basically the important move which we're going to make over the next couple of weeks to complete that picture. Now, last pillar, SAP and Microsoft, right? So the aligned integration between the strategic tools of both sides of SAP with Datasphere and SAP Analytics Cloud on the SAP side and with Fabric, which includes Power BI on the Microsoft side. How do we envision that? Now, right now, the integration, there are ways to use Datasphere for an integration with SAP sources. And this is actually what SAP proposes to a lot of customers as their standard reference architecture. Basically, this works, and I can show that in the system later on in a minute. This works by using Datasphere as a pure ETL tool, right? So Datasphere has kind of two flavors. You can use it as an analytics tool, as a data warehouse tool, similar to Fabric in the end, right? But you can also use it purely for ETL purposes. That's what SAP calls Datasphere Premium Outbound Integration, which basically allows you to connect a source system to a third-party environment, which can be Azure Data Lake Gen 2 in this case, for example, and then replicate the data from the source into the into that third-party environment. In this case, ADLS Gen 2. Right. The technology in Datasphere is called Datasphere replication flows, and they work very similar to any kind of replication technology. We'll see that in a second. Again, you basically connect to the source, you select the source objects you want to replicate, you specify the frequency in which the replication flow is supposed to run, and then the replication flow will, as always with change data capture, get an initial snapshot first, land it, in this case, in ADLS Gen 2, and subsequently land the data changes. Right? This is a nice way to integrate if you're if you're following SAP's strategy and SAP's recommendation here to get data into ADLS Gen 2. Unfortunately, Datasphere does not support OneLake at the moment. Right? So if you really want to integrate this with Fabric, you need to basically resort to ADLS Gen 2, create a storage container there, land the data, configure that storage container in your replication flow, land the data in that storage container, and then just use a shortcut from the Fabric side. Another thing which is missing compared to the mirroring capabilities, which we just saw, is, well, this just lands the data in files here in ADLS Gen 2. So the merge step, the second step, you can think of what you get here as comparable to the landing zone, which we saw in the mirroring diagram, right? So you get the change data in files in that storage container, but the merge you would have to do yourself. What you can do is for example, create a notebook here, which takes the files which Datasphere lands in ADLS Gen 2, and then merge these with sync tables here on the Fabric side. That's what a lot of customers, people with a background, for example, in Databricks, have done for many, many years for all kinds of sources, including SAP. With the notebook capabilities we have in Fabric, you can basically do that out of the box using a notebook. So let's quickly see what this looks like in Datasphere and on the Fabric side. So here we are in SAP Datasphere. You see the data builder. This is the tool where you would create these replication flows. Here I have created a replication flow for sales orders. On the left-hand side, you see a CDS view for sales orders, right? So you can also see this here. So we're connecting to an S/4HANA system, extracting from a CDS view. You can set some details here. So it's also a fairly simple and easy to configure experience. You can basically configure this to do initial and delta loads. And on the sync side, you specify a landing zone folder, as I called it here, just to kind of align it with the mirroring terminology, but it's just a container in ADLS Gen 2 in this case, as you see here, where you basically land the data, and then Datasphere, once you execute this replication flow, will continuously push the data. Down here, you can configure how frequently the updates happen. And when you do that and move on to the Fabric side, then you can basically create a shortcut here. You see that when you look at the icon here, this is a shortcut which basically has a folder for each source object. So here the sales order item, and you find folders for the initial snapshot and a specific folder for the deltas as well. And then off of this, you can basically start creating your notebook to merge the data changes into into your sync in OneLake. All right, so that's how that works. Of course, it would be nicer to have a streamlined experience. Let's see what the future brings. It's not like we're not thinking about this and not having discussions around this. Would be awesome to have a tighter integration between the Datasphere side and the Fabric side. In many ways, this is a specific one, and we'll see how this evolves. Right now, as I said, there's nothing blocking you from using Datasphere for such use cases. It requires a little bit of additional effort, but it's perfectly possible. And I think with that, I'm probably at the end of the presentation. Sorry, at the end of the presentation, and I would open it up for questions now. So let me see where I can start here. What's the best way to pull SAP cluster tables to Fabric? Well, whether a table is a cluster table or not, for example, the table connector would not even distinguish because it connects via the application server, and the application server makes that transparent, right? So whether BSEC is a transparent or a cluster table or pool table is not even relevant, right? To be honest, in the specific case of BSEC, I think it depends on the release, right? Newer SAP releases, even on non-HANA databases, don't have pool or cluster tables anymore, as far as I know. But access via the ABAP dictionary and the ABAP database connectivity basically makes all of that transparent anyway. So using the table connector for such purposes is perfectly possible. You would not have any issues. You would not even notice that a table is a cluster table. Does this BW connector support parsing parameters? Sorry, I'm missing the context a little bit now, whether this refers to the OpenHub connector or the Power Query connector. Maybe let's postpone this for a second. Connecting to SAP HANA requires to have specific SAP licenses. Yes, in many cases that is true. So if you're running HANA on premises, you need a HANA enterprise license, as far as I know. To be honest, always take what we say with a grain of salt, because in the end, that is something where we, from the Microsoft side, are not the experts. In the end, for such questions, I always recommend reaching out to your SAP sales rep. I think it's the case. Maybe it depends a little bit on the specific use case. Maybe read access is slightly different from write access. Check with your SAP account representative. Yes, there are some license aspects around this, as far as I know. Are there SAP licenses? License topics always the nicest ones. Are there SAP licenses that don't permit the connection between Fabric and SAP? To be honest, I would not know any license issues related to such connectivity. But again, if you want to get the full truth, ask your SAP representative for a reliable answer on this, better than asking us. We don't have insights into your contract, so we don't really know what you and SAP have signed. Plus, we're not the right people to interpret your contracts, right? So really reach out to SAP and ask them for confirmation of what exactly you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. Or check with your legal department. That's always an option as well. Is this via CDS views or data sources? Again, I'm missing the context. Maybe it's for the, hard to answer at this point because I don't recall which connector this refers to. Do the Fabric connectors work with SAP cloud systems like S/4HANA private cloud and public cloud? Private cloud for sure. So everything you do in the private cloud edition, you can from a technology perspective use here. Yes, absolutely. The public cloud edition, honestly, I'm not sure what exactly, which kind of APIs it exposes. I'm not even sure if you can do, for example, RFC connections to the public cloud edition. I think that's not possible. So with public cloud, you might have additional restrictions. Public cloud, I know, exposes OData APIs, so there are ways to connect here as well. But the RFC-based connectors, I think, would not work in that case. Is it supporting on-premise data gateway? Yes, I should have said that earlier on, and the diagrams which I showed never highlighted this aspect. On-premise data gateway is part of pretty much all SAP connectivity we have, at least for everything which is RFC based or based on ODBC, because for both cases you need to install kind of SAP specific drivers. For RFC connectivity, you need to install the SAP.NET connector, which we cannot redistribute. That's one of the reasons why we need an architecture which involves PDF case, a self-hosted integration runtime, and in the Fabric case, an on-premise data gateway, where you as the customer who has the license to download and use this software can download and install the .NET connector or the HANA ODBC connector. So for all ODBC-based or RFC-based connectors, you need an on-premise data gateway. The exception are the OData connectors, right? So when you want to use OData to connect an SAP source, you don't need an OPDG. Also, SAP line of business solutions like SuccessFactors, Ariba, etc. Well, SuccessFactors, for example, offers OData APIs for extraction. That's also how Datasphere does it. Maybe at least used to do it a while ago. Maybe I'm not aware of the latest developments here. So yes, there are connectors to these solutions. They're all point solutions in the end, right? There's no unified way as you have it in the ECC and S/4HANA world, where SAP basically provided or built standard infrastructure to extract data out of these sources. These line of business solutions, they basically are all acquired, right? So they're built based on different technology stacks and have a history, right? Which is also why they don't use the same kind of APIs or the same infrastructure. So it's really a question you need to look into the specific solution. As I said, SuccessFactors has a set of OData APIs to extract data. I don't even know how comprehensive they are. I know about customers who have successfully integrated SuccessFactors data to the degree they need it. So it's certainly possible. Whether you can get all of the data out of SuccessFactors which you need for your specific use case, hard to tell. And how comprehensive that is, I honestly can't tell. How about connecting with ECC systems? I think I mentioned that, right? All of the RFC-based connectors can connect to an ECC system. The table connector can connect. These partner solutions can connect. They're specifically built for ECC and S/4HANA. Some of them also support BW as a source. So those are options for ECC and for S/4HANA use cases. Is C4C a typo? Should it be CDC? No, that was not a typo. C4C in this slide with the 4 SAP connectors meant cloud for customer. Right? So it's SAP, it's an SAP sales solution, so to speak, CRM-like solution. Let's move down. Oh yes, Wolfgang, thanks for answering that. So CDC OData will not come. Let's see. So there's no free solution to load tables from SAP HANA via RFC calls. Well, that's a bit of a confusing statement because an SAP HANA database without an application server on top doesn't even offer an RFC, can't even be accessed by RFC, right? In the end, when you talk about accessing a standalone HANA database via the HANA connector, as I said, I think you will need a dedicated license, probably the enterprise license, or there are also mixes between a little bit of enterprise and a little bit of how's it called? The application license. I forgot the terminology. At least that used to be the case. But as you see, I mean, I've been with Microsoft for long enough to openly tell you I can't give you a precise and reliable statement on SAP licensing. Use of ODP extractors is only possible with partner solutions. Actually, these partner solutions do not use, or they, again, I need to be a little bit cautious. All of these partner solutions which we have offer options which do not use ODP. Right? ODP is a difficult topic in that context. I don't want to dive too deep into this, but these partner solutions offer change data capture capabilities which are not using ODP. Some of them have ODP as one option as well, but they also have alternatives. So net, all of these partner solutions can do change data capture out of SAP sources without ODP and without any without this SAP node, which is very prominent at least in these days, being affected by, or without being affected by this node. Awesome session, thank you. And that was after 26 minutes already. What is happening about SAP no longer allowing the use of ODP? Well, again, I would recommend reaching out to SAP, asking for a statement on that, asking for their plans. As I said, we have partner solutions which are certified by SAP, which are capable of doing change data capture. So that's one way to go. I also indicated that you can use SAP Datasphere for this use case. From our perspective, the most important thing is that you can get your SAP data into Fabric if that's your requirement, right? It's not so much about how. If SAP says, "Oh, data is not the or ODP is not the way to go," we're happy to offer alternatives. Yes, that is the note I mean, or whoever else meant. Our SAP rep said that the SAP CDC connector will no longer be approved. Well, approval is one thing. I mean, our connectors, honestly, at least the ADF connectors, never had an SAP certification. They work perfectly fine. So approval by SAP in terms of certification was never an issue there. We have, and adoption shows that it's not relevant, and also the robustness of these connectors is perfectly fine. So that's not really relevant. There are discussions about, and it's mentioned in the chat as well, right? This SAP node, which discourages the use of the ODP API. It's not so much a technical discussion. I don't want to go too deep into this. I think I clearly stated that there are lots of alternatives. If you want to follow the SAP approach, go with Datasphere. That's perfectly fine. We're happy to support you on that path. If you want to go a different route, look into the partner offerings. You see that how these partners are integrating with mirroring, which really gives you a nice end-to-end change data capture experience. So from that perspective, there are lots of ways to do things in a compliant way. The rest, I would say, the future will tell. What are the costs for mirroring? A lot of the, you will see a lot of slides which tell you mirroring is free, which I think means that we do not charge you for the compute which is consumed by mirroring. So all the compute consumed by the mirroring engine is free of charge. And I think all the storage as well. So even both the storage on the landing zone part and the storage on the table part and on the sink, all of that is free. From that perspective, mirroring is free. We've been told that writing data to a storage account that way outside of SAP Datasphere requires a premium Datasphere license. It's not a premium Datasphere license. There's something called premium outbound integration in Datasphere. If you look at, there's a pricing calculator for Datasphere. Maybe that's something you can find on the web. If you look there are many options to configure your Datasphere tenant, right? You can define how much compute you want, how many cores your HANA Cloud database should have, how much storage it should have, all those configurations you can do. And there's one specific tile for so-called premium outbound integration. That's basically a place where you configure how much data you want to transfer using this capability, using these replication flows I just showed, out of your SAP source system into ADLS Gen 2. And that is basically not sure if that's a specific license or just a configuration as part of your Datasphere tenant configuration. That is, I think, what you need. Again, take my words with a grain of salt. Reach out to your SAP account executive or rep, sales rep, to figure out what the truth is in your specific case. Data extraction usually costs money. What are the costs there? I think we have answered that. Can we point to SAP ECC data using this mirroring concept? Yes. So this open mirroring works with ECC and S/4HANA for all of these partners. Some of these partners also support BW on top. Let's see. Needs the man in the middle storage account to be public accessible for working with Datasphere link. Okay, I think on security questions I'm a little bit weak. Sorry, can't answer the security question here. Does the man in the middle storage account need to be publicly accessible for working with Datasphere? Unfortunately, I can't tell. To push the data from Datasphere into ADLS require an additional license. I think we covered that. It's, as far as I know, not a license. It's a specific configuration, which you, of course, need to pay for. and probably maybe there's some provisioning to be done on the SAP side to provision the required compute. But I don't think it's a license. Again, SAP will be able to tell you the full truth on that. How to read Datasphere replication flows in ADLS Gen 2. It generates metadata file and actual data files in Parquet. Yeah, the actual data files land in Parquet format. That's true, and you can use a notebook on the Fabric side. So, right, you have ADLS Gen 2. You create a shortcut from your Fabric OneLake, and you can create a notebook which reads these files and transforms them or merges them with a sync table in OneLake. That's how you would do that. What are the options to pull SAP data to the Fabric via ABAP CDS views of VDM? When it comes to CDS views, Datasphere can, of course, work with CDS views. Some of these partner tools can do that as well. We don't have a good overview yet. We're currently working on this to basically also provide an overview of the capabilities of these tools. You can also reach out and check on the website of each individual tool what exact sources and what exact scenarios they support. When you go to the first block, which I talked about, the integrate your SAP data with Microsoft Fabric one, you find links to all these partner solutions, and then you can basically figure out what exactly these tools support. Can we also use Datasphere replication views and then use ADF to get the data from the? That was not a question, it was a statement. We used the SAP CDC connector in Synapse to pull data from SAP via SLT. Will it be available in Fabric anytime soon? Well, I mean, given SAP stands on the usage of the ODP framework, we do not plan to bring something like the CDC connector into Fabric at the moment. As I said, for change data capture, our concept is mirroring, specifically open mirroring with all these partner solutions. That will give you very similar capabilities. In this case, if you used SLT, you basically did table replication from your ECC source system into Synapse in your case, right? Into ADLS Gen 2 in the end, I guess. With these partner solutions, you can do exactly the same into OneLake, right? So perfectly fine. Table replication is no issue at all. Next question, do you have a syntax or use a notebook to parse Parquet? No, we don't have an example for that yet. I'm actually thinking of creating or writing a blog post to just provide some template code. Sometimes things are a little bit tricky, you know, if you have multiple files coming in and you need to process things in the right order, that can become a bit tricky. So I will probably not do the hard work and build something which is enterprise ready and fully able to handle all cases and all issues, but some template code which shows you how you would rather relatively easily do that to basically take the data out of such a Parquet file, the change data, and how to merge it. That is something which I'm currently thinking of. If time permits, I will write a blog post and maybe we'll publish that on our docs as well. Next question. There are lots of answers. The last two. So the overall recommendation for 90% of the use cases to use ODBC. No, that's actually not the case. I mean, ODBC is the way to go, as I said, with the HANA database in the end. It's maybe the way if you want to connect to a Datasphere tenant where you store your data in HANA Cloud. All these partner solutions are not using ODBC, right? So I would definitely not say 90% of the use cases are ODBC based. I would rather say it's 15. So it's more the opposite. I think the majority of use cases, especially when it comes to getting your data out of your ERP systems like SAP ECC, SAP S/4HANA, also your BW systems, those are not going to be ODBC based in most cases. Should users avoid connecting directly to SAP tables using the Power Query connectors? No, why not? I mean, of course, there are some caveats with allowing direct access to your SAP source system, right? I mean, if you allow this for too many users with uncontrolled workloads, you can get in trouble. So there are always caveats around this, but in principle, I mean, there are good reasons why we offer these connectors. There are good use cases for them. We have a lot of customers using them for exactly these use cases. So there, I would never say anyone should avoid using any of these connectors. Definitely not. All right, and with that, I think we are at the top of the hour. Thanks for all these questions. Looks like there was a lot of interest, so thanks for that. Thanks for your participation, and I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you.